Part 11. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Which John Word. Chapter 101. Chapter 101, Dog licking just likes to bite the nose on the face. Can you book a few more days for me in the future? Sunian was proud of Lee Baiken's words. The price is no problem. I think this tastes delicious and makes my whole stomach warm. Lee Baiken felt that since Sunian was so proud in his heart, it would be a waste if he didn't do something. Sure enough, after he finished saying this, he heard Sunian's voice about to explode. What did this guy say? It's not enough for him to do it once, I have to do it for several days. Why does this licking dog like to dig his nose into his face so much? It's really too abominable. What, can't it? Lee Baiken said again casually. What else can Sunian do? Lee Baiken is looking at her like this. Can she still refuse? So she could only smile and nod. Then I'll trouble you. Sunian shook his head. Baiken, how can you tell me that I can help you a little? Then I will be very happy. The worst case scenario is that I can just buy some white porridge and fool it anyway. All the white porridges in the world have the same taste. I don't believe that this stubborn licking dog can even taste the difference in white porridge. If he can really taste it, then my Sunian will have his surname Sharp. After finishing the porridge, Lee Baiken leaned on the sofa. He was thinking that since Sunian was like this, if he didn't satisfy her little wish, then he would be sorry for her efforts in making this porridge. Originally, Lee Baiken planned to expose Sunian and embarrass her a little bit when he drank the porridge that Sunian bought casually. But for several days, all he drank was white porridge cooked by Sunian himself. Even later, there were several delicious side dishes served every day. But every day, he could hear all kinds of complaints in Sunian's heart. I am so tired. It's really troublesome to do this. Fortunately, I didn't let this licking dog know that I can cook, and whatever gets a man's stomach can get a man's heart. The person who said this must be a man. I have to stay up for a few days and wait until Lee Baiken's stomach recovers. Even if this family kneels on the ground and begs me, I will not do it for this guy. Yes, if I continue to do it for him, he will be his grandson. Hearing these thoughts, Lee Baiken felt much better for some reason. He couldn't help but look around him. When he saw Sunian lying on the bed, he couldn't help but smile. I immediately returned my gaze to the food in front of me. But luckily I'm smart. I had the impression that I was a kitchen idiot in front of Lee Baiken before, so after doing it this time, I don't have to do it anymore. Sunian felt that her mood was much better when she thought about it, and then she sat up and moved her body. I saw Lee Baiken eating next to him. She felt that if her meal this time could not be in vain, then she would really be at a loss. Baiken, what do you think? I specially asked the chef to make you some nourishing food for your stomach. I carefully selected the menu and other items. You are getting better and better recently. Are you feeling better? Lee Baiken raised his eyes and looked at Sunian when he heard this. Sunian looked at him seriously at this moment, looking very much like a child who had done something right and wanted to get a reward from his parents quickly. Then, under Sunian's eyes, Lee Baiken said unhurriedly, I really need to thank you for this matter. Without you, I would still feel very uncomfortable now. Thank you for finding such a good person, chef. Sunian's eyes brightened a little more. Although Lee Baiken is only the second male lead, he is still a domineering president. If he said thank you, he would definitely not just say thank you. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Which John Word. Chapter 102. Chapter 102 Insult me as much as you want with money. Under Sunian's expectant eyes, Lee Baiken said, I want to thank you very much, but I don't know how to thank you. Let me think about it carefully. These words instantly raised Sunian's expectations. But even so, Sunian did not forget his identity, so he said obediently, "Baikan, don't say that. Have you forgotten what I once said? I am willing to do anything for you, even for me. Being able to do something for you is my luck. If my guess is correct, even if Lee Baikan has benefited from me and is getting better, he will still find ways to draw a clear line with me for a domineering president. Drawing a clear line is usually, money, smashed. I just like this way of insulting people. Come on, just insult me as much as you want." Just as Sunian was looking forward to it, Lee Baikan spoke, "If that's the case, then I won't force you." Sunian. "And if I remember correctly, then you have been with the old man for so long, and according to the old man's love for you, then you will definitely give you all good things, and you will not be rare. If this is the case, then I will not bother you." Sunian. At this moment, Sunian really felt like he was going to explode. This hateful guy. I know this guy is a bitch, but I really didn't expect that he could be such a bitch. Really not an ordinary dog. But Lee Baikan was able to show with his actions that he was still capable of being a dog. Then Lee Baikan said, "However, judging from the meals these days, this chef must have put his heart and soul into it. Sunian, can you bring him over? I want to thank him properly. After all, if it were not for him, if so, I might still feel uncomfortable now." Sunian really didn't know how to describe his mood at this moment. "I actually want to thank you in public. I am the cook. How can I find someone for him? Do I have to find someone randomly and then watch that person pretend to take my credit? Why did the plot develop like this? This is really not scientific at all. Very unscientific." Lee Baikan continued to speak as if adding fuel to the fire. "Why don't you speak? Is this matter difficult?" Then a smile appeared on Sunian's face. "How can it be difficult? Of course it's not difficult. Baikan, you are so kind. I really feel that I love you even more now. You are like this, you. How can I love others, how can I let you go?" Sunian felt that if he continued to stay here, he would be so angry that he vomited blood and died. After saying this, he immediately smiled and said, It's a little inconvenient for me, so I won't tell you any more." He then went directly to the bathroom. Don't give Lee Baikan a chance to talk nonsense at all. Wait until we got to the bathroom. Sunian immediately washed his face with cold water, hoping to calm down. She felt that if she didn't do this, it would be impossible for the scene to continue. Sunian took a few deep breaths to calm down. She felt that God had deliberately made Lee Baikan so difficult and annoying this time in order to prevent her from getting Mo Bao out. But this can't stop her determination to make calligraphy treasures. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 103. Chapter 103. Mr. Lee, the executive information you want. Wait until Sunian, who has adjusted his mood, comes out again. I found that the culprit, who was about to explode with anger, was already lying on the bed. This made Sunian feel like a fool. Sunian, who was starting to feel curious, suddenly fell down. She walked towards her bed angrily. Just went to bed. I felt as if I was sitting on something. Sunian reached out and took it out. I saw a beautifully packaged gift box. After opening it, you will see a beautiful diamond bracelet. Sunian fell in love with the bracelet the first time she saw it. Sunian looked at the hospital bed next to him. He saw Lee Baikan with his back turned to him. She was not a fool, and she understood immediately that Lee Baikan did what he did just now on purpose. Just to play with yourself. Sunian was a little less happy. Lee Baikan, who had his back to Sunian, raised the corners of his mouth slightly. This hateful guy, he doesn't even thank me seriously, he insists on stepping on me. No, this guy is a licker and a straight man. If the woman mainly falls in love with this guy, then she is blind. But this diamond bracelet is really beautiful. Hearing these thoughts, Lee Baikin slowly closed his eyes and continued to fall asleep. Sunian felt that since he had accepted Lee Baikin's things, he should take care of Lee Baikin more seriously. After all, just because Lee Baikin is immoral does not mean that she is immoral. Every day I am trying to think of ways to increase nutrition for Lee Baikin, trying to make Lee Baikin fat and white. However, Sunian stopped when he passed Lee Baikin's desk. She picked up a document. At this time, Lee Baikin happened to come in from outside the room. Seeing Sunian's behavior, he slowed down. North District renovation plan, should I remind Lee Baikin about this? Sunian looked at the document with a very solemn expression, completely different from his usual aloofness. The person in charge of this plan will be favored by landmen in the future. For this reason, after the death of Lee Baikin, the big enemy, he did not hesitate to give all the North District plan to landmen, and landmen also took it. Because of this, it brings huge trouble to the company. Lee Baikin frowned immediately. As the CEO of the Lee family, he clearly knows how important the North District plan is to the Lee family. He also knows what it will be like if the entire plan falls into Huo Linyuan's hands. No, I can't waste time here. I have to do something. At least this time, when Lee Baikin is dead, it will be easier for me. Lee Baikin lowered his footing and walked in. The person in charge of the North District. He has been his confidant for many years and he feels he is a trustworthy person. Only then will the entire North District renovation plan be handed over to him. Just when Sunian was thinking about how to find more information and get more information in a limited environment. While thinking about it, she returned to her hospital bed. She didn't know that the person next to her had already passed a message and obtained all the information. Lee Baikin looked to the side. Looking at Sunian with a worried face, he couldn't help but smile. Then Josu knocked on the door and came in. Mr. Lee, this is the executive information you want, please take a look. After saying that, he put a stack of documents on Lee Baikin's desk. Lee Baikin noticed Sunian's bright eyes. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich John Word. Chapter 104. Chapter 104 Stealing the heroine's credit. However, Sunian's happiness did not last long. Hey, why are you happy? I don't know how old Mr. Lee is, and I don't know how many executives there are. It's just such a stack, and it's so thin, it's weird that it's there. Look at my brain, how come I don't even know this? Lee Baikin was not in a hurry, so he tapped the document carelessly with his finger bones. The posture of Zhang Taigong fishing for those who want to take the bait. Sure enough, it didn't take long for Sunian to come over slowly. Documents like executive information should be classified among secrets. They would definitely not be placed on the table openly for me to see. What kind of excuse should I find to see them? What should I do if I am caught by Lee Baikin and think that I have different intentions? If it is normal, then it is okay, but now, what if I really delay something important? Lee Baikin glanced at the documents he had spread out on the table. Sunian finally moved over. Baikin, you have been busy for so long. You must be tired. You need a good rest now, Sunian said with a flattering face. I hurt my foot, not my brain. Sunian was speechless with one sentence. This guy. If you really can't speak, then don't speak, don't be so irritating. Care a little bit, is there such a choice? If possible, then I really want to tie up this hateful guy directly, and then whip him with a small leather whip. It's better to add dripping wax. Lee Baikin just felt that if he let Sunian see it directly and openly, it would make her suspicious. but he really didn't expect that this woman would think so exaggeratedly. To think that I can think of all those messy things. Author, what's in the heart, who still cares about practicality? If I had known this was the case, I might as well have shown it to her directly. So before Sunian spoke again, Lee Baikan stood up and walked quickly towards the bathroom. Sunian was behind Lee Baikan and glared at him fiercely. Elating her in this to be so venomous. Lee Baikan. He obviously wanted to make room for her. Who said it was diarrhea? Lee Baikan entered the bathroom with a dark face, but he did not close the door too tightly, but left a small gap to see Sunian. Although the current posture is indeed not very good, let's make do with it. Sunian waited for 2 minutes and then immediately started flipping through the information. Because the executive destroyed a lot of information when he defected to the male protagonist. She didn't read everything in her previous life. Fei Quan, yes, this is Fei Quan. If I remember correctly, according to the trajectory of his previous life, his wife Wang Ling will be hit by a car in the future, and the heroine happens to be nearby at that time. Because they are loving husband and wife, Fei Quan will take everything and go to the male protagonist. In the words of the book, this means abandoning the darkness and turning to the light. Looking at these, Sunian suddenly had an idea. If I could save Fei Quan's wife before the heroine Lan Min, then I would be able to prevent Fei Quan from backstabbing the company, and then I would be less troubled in the future. A smile appeared on Sunian's face. Lee Baikan, who had been hiding in the bathroom, silently closed the bathroom door at this time. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich John Word. Chapter 105. Chapter 105. There is nothing wrong with his body at all. 3 days later. Sunian had prepared early. Yes, she planned to go and guard the place where Wang Ling's accident happened. I plan to send a magic weapon from heaven when something happens to Wang Ling. But when she went out, she encountered a problem. Lee Baikan stood in front of her. Looking at Lee Baikan in front of her, she moved to the side, but unexpectedly, Lee Baikan also moved a little bit. Sunian. What's going on with this guy? Is he looking for trouble? Are you planning to go out? Lee Baikan spoke first. Well, I have something to deal with, what's the matter? I'll go with you. Sunian was a little surprised by these words. She looked at Lee Baikan in front of her and even wondered if she had heard it wrong. Lee Baikan has already made a good excuse for himself. The old man has repeatedly told me that I need to take good care of you. If something happens to you, then I have no way to explain it to the old man. These words instantly made Sunian feel pain. After all, she was going to stay there and wait for something to happen to Wang Ling. What would he do with such a thing? Baikan, you're not feeling well, so forget it. It's not something important to me. Sunian laughed, just go and walk around casually. You don't have anything shameful to do you? Sunian. If there is nothing shameful, then why don't you let me go? Lee Baikan said deliberately. Lee Baikan has said what he said, what else can Sunian do? Baikan, how can you think of me so much? Am I like this in your heart? I can have any unscrupulous things. If you want to go, of course I can take you there, but if you go, you have to promise me something. Huh? Promise me that if you feel uncomfortable, you will tell me as soon as possible. If you can't agree to this, then I won't let you accompany me even if you misunderstand that I have something shameful to do. I'll go, Sunian said seriously. Lee Baikan felt very uncomfortable when Sunian deliberately looked at him like a doctor. I immediately picked up Sunian and hugged him sideways. Sunian was frightened to death by the sudden suspension, and he subconsciously tightened his clothes. What does this guy want to do? It scares me to death. Doesn't he want to prove that his body is fine? Such a stupid behavior, ha ha ha, This Lee Baiken is really funny, he can actually think of such a stupid way. Okay, Baiken, I know your health is fine. You put me down first, Sunian said in a delicate voice, trying hard not to laugh out loud. But Lee Baiken had no intention of letting her go. Instead, he hugged her and walked out. Where are you going? It's really not necessary. You just need to name a place. Sunian glanced at Lee Baiken secretly and could only silently tell him the location. Then Lee Baiken hugged Sunian the whole time, even in the car. If Lee Baiken wasn't afraid of wasting time, then he really planned to hold Sunian. He didn't believe that this didn't prove that his body was fine. Lee Baiken also knew that such behavior was indeed a bit childish, but he had no way to argue with Sunian, so he had to use this method. Prove that there is nothing wrong with his body. There is really no problem at all. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 106. Chapter 106. Is this the difference between me and the heroine? Sunian lived 2 lifetimes. No, if you include the life before entering the book, it can even be said that he lived 3 lifetimes. I have never been hugged by a man like a princess. And we held her for such a long time. So Sunian was unsurprisingly shy. But Sunian was not that stupid. The place he told Lee Baiken was not the place where Wang Ling's accident occurred, but nearby. After arriving at the place, Lee Baiken put the person down and asked, "Does your back hurt?" Sunian was confused by the question. When she came to her senses, she realized that Lee Baiken was asking about the injury on her back. She shook her head in confusion. I seemed to have been looking at his chest muscles the whole time, and I didn't seem to feel any pain. Lee Baiken felt that he was really unnecessary. After all, this woman was thinking about those things the whole time. But he didn't know why, he just couldn't help but ask. Forget it and just have peace of mind. Baiken, I'm telling the truth, don't be angry. Actually, I don't have anything important to do here. I just stayed in the hospital for too long recently and wanted to eat the special snacks here. The reason why I didn't follow him in the hospital, tell the truth, I want to stay with you for a while, Sunian said timidly. Ha ha ha, I guess Lee Baiken will be so angry when he hears what I say. Ha ha, not only did I touch his chest muscles all the way, but I also made this guy so angry that he was so angry that today is really a good day. As long as I wait until Lee Baiken leaves, then I can go about my business. But the facts proved that Sunian's calculation was wrong. Lee Baiken just said a faint hum. This made Sunian, who was ready for Lee Baiken to scold him bloody, stunned. Just and then nothing? Lee Baiken saw that Sunian's eyes were about to fall off, and then he said casually, I just don't want the old man to cause trouble for me. I don't dare to be interested in what you want to do. For me, you can do whatever you want. Sunian. What is going on? Why does this guy look like he plans to follow me all the time? If he keeps following me, how can I do business? The more Lee Baiken heard Sunian's crazy thoughts, the more he wanted to continue teasing Sunian. What's wrong, are you unhappy? I think you can be regarded as my savior after all, so I think I can do something for you. It's also reasonable. These words successfully made Sunian even more angry. It took me so long that this guy still knew that I was his savior. I thought this guy didn't know. If you know, then why not do something to repay your kindness? Although I can't do other things for you, I can still go out with you for a walk, which can be regarded as my repayment to you. Sunian is really heartbroken now. Is this the difference between me and the heroine? After all, it was a life-saving favor. If you go shopping with me, is this considered repayment? Then the life of this licking dog is really too cheap. As he is, if nothing happens to him, then who will? The key is that this guy is so shameless, I still have to show a grateful look. I am a vicious female supporting character, not a pure wronged person. No matter how angry Sunian was in his heart, he could only say word by word, I didn't think of Baikan. You still take such a small thing to your heart. It really doesn't matter. For me, it's good that you're okay. God, please open your eyes. How can you still stand looking at such a shameless person? Do you really want to kill this guy without striking a blow? I feel so uncomfortable. I was too bored when I was writing yesterday. In the chapter I posted yesterday, I was caught driving Diandian's car and was banned for a chapter. Kk, just Diandian's car. Why? I haven't released it now. Come out. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 107. Chapter 107. The target person appears. However, as soon as this idea came out, Sunian quickly pouted in his heart. No, I haven't gotten out my calligraphy yet, this guy can't die, God, don't listen, I'm talking nonsense, I didn't say anything. Lee Baikan felt very comfortable that Sunian was embarrassed. After all, he didn't know how many times he was angry because of Sunian's chaotic thoughts. Sunian must also be well fed. So Lee Baikan continued to say shamelessly, as long as you are happy, if the old man asks, then remember to tell the old man that I have repaid your life-saving grace, so that the old man will not talk to me. Sunian. Okay, let's go shopping. You can go shopping as much as you want. What else could Sunian say? She could only take Lee Baikan for a walk silently, looking at the snacks on the roadside. Sunian is really a little greedy. But she didn't buy it. Hey, if I weren't worried about Lee Baikan's stomach problem, I really wanted to buy him some of these things and force him to eat them as a savior. Okay, this kind of plot usually involves the heroine, which makes the heroine different from a coquettish beauty like me. In this way, Sunian took Lee Baikan and walked back and forth in these streets. The purpose is to bore Lee Baikan, then leave her behind. But after walking around for several times, Lee Baikan didn't feel irritable at all. Sunian felt like his legs were almost useless. However, when he looked at Lee Baikan beside him, he was still in high spirits. I wonder if it was Sunian's imagination. She actually felt that Lee Baikan seemed to be more and more interested in shopping. You are tired? When Lee Baikan asked this question, Sunian quickly shook his head. After all, she hasn't done her main work yet, so how can she be tired? Seeing Sunian's stubborn look, Lee Baikan felt that he couldn't continue wandering like this. No matter how he continued, Sunian's body would definitely be unable to bear it. If you are tired, just tell me that. I don't mean to go back, but I can hold you and continue walking. I haven't had such a leisurely walk for a long time, and I also want to take a walk. These words were undoubtedly not a bolt from the blue to Sunian. Is Lee Baikan really addicted to walking? God, what is this? Lee Baikan's character is also a domineering president. Why is this happening? Why, God, why do you want to play with me like this? Lee Baikan couldn't help but chuckle in his heart, and immediately planned to pick up Sunian again. But before he touched Sunian, Sunian's attention was already attracted by something else. Wang Ling. The target person appears. Hearing this, Lee Baikan retracted his hand and turned to look in Sunian's direction. Immediately I saw a pregnant woman. When Sunian saw the pregnant woman, she calmed down a bit. No wonder, if Lan Ren only saved Wang Ling, then her husband would have gone too far to betray the Li family for this, but if Wang Ling was pregnant with Liujia, then it would be different. Lee Baikan had doubts before. After all, he would not be too careless about such an important matter in the North District, but at the time he thought this was a so-called plot arrangement. But now everything seems to make sense. There is no man in this world who does not value his wife and children. So it is normal for a benefactor who saved his wife and children to betray the Lee group. But at this moment, he stopped because of Sunian's voice in his mind. Because Sunian said, "But, I clearly know that she will have a car accident in the future, so why don't I just watch it like this?" End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich John Word. Chapter 108. Chapter 108, Glad I made the right choice. It has already been planned. He has even imagined that if he becomes Wang Ling's savior, he can control her husband. But at this moment she realized that she really couldn't do it. It's impossible to watch Wang Ling face danger step by step. And Wang Ling walked toward her little by little. As someone who was a mother in her previous life, Sunian knows very well that anything that happens during pregnancy will affect the child and may even lead to miscarriage. Li Baikan heard Sunian's tangled thoughts when he saw Fei Quan's wife planning to do something. Do I really want Wang Ling to take risks for my own selfish desires? But in this matter, Wang Ling was already in trouble, so I just followed the plot. But after this rebirth, everything is different from the plot in the previous life. What if Wang Ling's plot also changes? What if something happens to Wang Ling because of her selfishness? Li Baikan couldn't help but laugh in his heart when he heard this. This Sunian really thinks about that child all the time. But she is really kind. When Wang Ling walked to Sunian's side, she passed by him. Sunian subconsciously clenched her fists, then turned around and shouted to Wang Ling, who continued to walk forward, "Hey, lady, you seem to have dropped something." Wang Ling, who was walking forward, subconsciously stopped when she heard such a sudden sentence. Sunian, who had already made a decision, quickly walked to Wang Ling's side and patted her shoulder. "I seem to have seen something fall from your body just now. Look at what's on your body. Did it fall? If something really fell, I'll help you find it." Hearing this, Wang Ling nodded. "Wait a minute, I'll check my things." After saying that, she started to rummage through the things in her bag. "Ah, I seem to have lost a small toy I just bought," Wang Ling said after searching for it for a while. Seeing Wang Ling like this, Sunian felt deeply. "Don't worry, tell me what the toy you dropped is like. You are inconvenient now, I will help you find it." While they were looking for something, Li Baikan looked towards the intersection. This is where Sunian said Wang Ling should have had a car accident. The next moment, a large truck suddenly ramped up and hit a wall on the side of the road. The huge sound shocked everyone around him. This also includes Sunian. Sunian saw the tragic collision of the truck and subconsciously took a few steps back. She didn't dare to think about what would happen if she really let Wang Ling take the risk because of a mistake. Even if Wang Ling was lucky enough to survive, the child would definitely not be able to survive a car accident of this magnitude. Li Baikan, who looked back, saw Sunian's face was so pale, so he planned to walk towards her to comfort her. But before he walked over, Sunian immediately looked at Wang Ling next to her and supported her. "Are you okay? Didn't I scare you? Do you want me to take you to the hospital?" Wang Ling shook her head and said with lingering fear, No, I'm fine." But Sunian, who has the experience of being a mother, still can't rest assured. "You can't be careless now, I'd better take you to the hospital." After saying that, he looked at Li Baikan. "Baikan, we have been shopping for so long, and we are just about to go back. Can I take her with me to the hospital?" End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich John Word. Chapter 109. Chapter 109. Fortunately, I don't care about reputation. Lee Baiken looked at Sunian in front of him. I saw that she didn't look as unreliable as usual, and even had an uneasy mood on her face. What if Lee Baiken doesn't agree? If he doesn't seem like a nosy person, how can I ask him to help send Wang Ling to the hospital? If I didn't hear the doctor say it was okay, then I couldn't feel at ease. What to do, what should I say now? Damn it, when it's time to use my brain, why is my brain turning into a ball of mush? Lee Baiken walked to Sunian's uneasy gaze and said, "Why are you looking at me like this? If you didn't know, you would think that I am the kind of person who refuses to save anything." These words made Sunian startled. "You guys wait a moment, I'll ask the driver to bring the car over." After finishing speaking, Lee Baiken took out his mobile phone and notified the driver. Sunian only realized that he was thinking too much when he saw Lee Baiken like this. Then the two took Wang Ling back to the hospital. Lee Baiken arranged various inspections. Sunian was completely relieved when he heard from the doctor that Wang Ling was fine. At this time, Fei Quan, the husband, also hurried over. Fei Quan walked up to the doctor with a face full of anxiety, grabbed his hand and asked nervously, "Doctor, do you have a patient named Wang Ling here? How is she? Is she okay?" As Fei Quan talked, his eyes began to turn red. Like a person on the brink of despair. "Who are you as a patient?" the doctor asked. "I am her husband. It turns out that there is nothing wrong with the patient. He is just a little frightened. However, it is best to rest in bed for a while and have a good miscarriage." Fei Quan was not relieved when he heard this. Instead, he dragged the doctor to confirm again and again. Finally he breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, he noticed Lee Baiken standing next to him. "Mr. Lee, why are you here?" Before Lee Baiken could say anything, the doctor next to him said, "Wang Ling's family, you have to thank Mr. Lee properly. It was Mr. Lee who sent your wife to the hospital." These words surprised Fei Quan. After all, as a senior executive of the Lee Group, he had been dealing with Lee Baiken for a long time. In Fei Quan's perception, the CEO is almost a selfless king of hell. Almost every time he goes to the CEO's office to report on his work, he is in a state of arrogance and dare not show up, for fear of doing something wrong or saying something wrong. He really didn't expect Lee Baiken to have such an enthusiastic side. He immediately looked at Lee Baiken excitedly. "Mr. Lee, thank you. Thank you for sending my wife to the hospital. Thank you very much. I don't know what to say now. If it weren't for you, then my wife wouldn't know what would have happened." "What's the matter? You are the benefactor of our family." Lee Baiken nodded lightly. "It's okay, it's just a coincidence." While he was speaking, he looked at Sunian, who was a little unhappy next to him. "What, the credit goes to this licking dog? You know, it's all my credit, okay. If I hadn't shouted, Wang Ling might be lying in the operating room now." "Ah, why is Lee Baiken famous? Is it because Lee Baiken is the second male lead? Am I an unknown vicious female supporting character? This treatment is really bad." "Hey, okay, as long as mother and son are safe. Fortunately I am not the kind of person who cares about reputation." Lee Baiken then spoke. "It's not me you want to thank, but Sunian. It was she who asked me to send your wife to the hospital." End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich John Word. Chapter 110. Chapter 110. Dreaming Again. Sunian, who was complaining in his heart. Fei Quan also looked at Sunian, and then quickly walked up to her. "Young lady, it turns out it's you. You are really the savior of our family. You are really a kind-hearted person. Your kindness will definitely help you in the future. Good people will be rewarded." This time Sunian's social fears were offended. She could only keep smiling and say you're welcome to Fei Quan. The two of them just kept going back and forth. In the end, Li Baikan ended this embarrassing situation by using Sunian's unwellness as an excuse to ask Fei Quan to take good care of his wife. After leaving, Sunian also breathed a sigh of relief. But she was really happy. Hey, I really envy Fei Quan's wife. When she was pregnant, her husband took such good care of her, unlike me who was destined to be a single mother. Oops, I shouldn't have slipped away so fast. I should have gone to see Wang Ling, and then get a good taste of Wang Ling's pregnancy, so maybe I could get pregnant with Mo Bao faster. This made Li Baikan next to her smile. If he doesn't touch her, what's the point of being pregnant? However, he couldn't help but look at the woman beside him. He just happened to catch Sunian secretly looking at him. Sunian, who was caught, quickly moved his eyes away and looked elsewhere. Looks like I have to do something, I have to get Li Baikan seeds quickly. To avoid long nights and too many dreams. Let me think about it and make a perfect plan. Hurry up, get the seeds. At these words, Li Baikan subconsciously speeded up his pace. After all, there were many people around and he was afraid that he would not be able to hold on. Sunian saw Li Baikan speeding up his pace, so he also walked faster to catch up with Li Baikan. Night. 3 o'clock in the morning. Li Baikan suddenly woke up from his dream. He sat up suddenly. After sitting for a while, Li Baikan gently pressed his eyebrows with his fingers and couldn't help but chuckle. Perhaps it's because of something that happened during the day. He actually dreamed that Sunian was crying helplessly with a pregnant belly. She was very pitiful. In the dream, he wanted to comfort her, but he couldn't touch her no matter what method he tried. Now that I think about it carefully, it's really a bit ridiculous. Even if according to Sunian's statement, he died in his previous life, then Sunian's belly contained his only bloodline, so according to the old man's temperament, he would definitely take care of Sunian as a treasure. How could you cry like that? Li Baikan didn't understand why he had such a ridiculous dream. Despite this, Li Baikan couldn't help but look at Sunian on the bed next to him. Because Sunian was sleeping on her side, Li Baikan could only see her back at the moment. Despite this, Li Baikan also felt a lot more at ease, because the fear caused by the things in the dream also disappeared a lot. Li Baikan was not sleepy now, so he just leaned on the pillow and reviewed today's events. Although Sunian stopped things and changed the original plot, to a certain extent, Sunian also achieved his goal. Fei Quan regarded her as his savior, so he would not betray the Li family and go to Huo Linyuan. Hunting for Lanzi even today. But Li Baikan didn't know whether this was a good thing or a bad thing. What would be the consequences of Sunian's change? This reminded Li Baikan of the feeling of being controlled by the so-called plot. Thinking of this, his fingers clenched involuntarily. In this way, Li Baikan sat blankly all night. End of this chapter.